As it turns out, there were a few more things to say about industrialization and its spread before we get back into social effects and the effects in general. First of all, like I was alluding to, Belgium, France, Germany, and then the United States soon followed Great Britain in industrialization. The United States actually had a couple of really sweet advantages, which you'll explore more in Chapter 31. Resources, first of all, like people, and also land. They just had a tremendous amount of both of those because of their growing population, mainly due to migration. And just tons and tons of resources. We're talking about coal and oil and raw materials and timber, anything you could want. In America, also, there was the invention of interchangeable parts. Some of you have probably heard of Eli Whitney because of the invention of the cotton gin. Now that invention is he probably had a little help with that since he would probably not be dealing with cotton, um, actually handling it very often since he was of the upper classes. But he did invent interchangeable parts, which standardize size and weight. I mean, it's basically like your phone charger. All phones can use the same chargers. Um, it would be the opposite of Apple or iPhones or iPads or whatever, where you don't have like a USB portal. USB portals work on all types of computers. They're standard except for Apple products. They have this special niche. And then also, corporations turned into monopolies, which was really, really good for business for them. And that basically allowed them to corner the market. This would be people like Andrew Carnegie. Um, this relates mainly to Key Concept 5.1, Roman numeral 1D, which refers to the new methods of industrial production becoming common in other areas, and also 5.1 Roman numeral 3, letter B, or financial instruments expanding. So, getting back to social classes. There were many new social classes created by the Industrial Revolution, and this had to do with this wealth that was being created. So firstly, this goes into Key Concept 5.1, Roman numeral 6b, which basically talks about the new classes that are being created, and also general gender roles. Um, so I guess it's A and B. So you have the business and factory owners, or people who own the capital. These people make a tremendous amount of wealth from this time period. And then you have the expansion of the middle class, because firstly, you have managers of factories, you have lawyers who are needed to uh, handle these growing businesses and these growing partnerships. And you also have an expansion of population, which leads to a need for more people like doctors and other professions. And then you have everybody else, the urban proletariat or factory workers. This is the majority of your population. And for them, their success, their lifestyle actually probably went down. We'll be moving from this to gender roles momentarily. So there were positive effects of the Industrial Revolution. I mean, obviously there were these long-term positive effects, but also there were shorter-term positive effects. And this gets into 5.1 Roman numeral 6, letter B, what I was talking about with gender roles. First of all, it can be strongly argued that industrialization hastened the disappearance of slavery because wage earners became much more important to the economy because you needed people to consume all of these new goods that you were creating. You also had an expanding middle class. You can see the triangle on the previous slide for why that was occurring. New jobs, for the most part, an expanding of existing jobs like managers. However, there were some negative effects. First of all, so to get into these, a couple of social ones, women were forced further into the home. If you were not a woman of the proletariat working in the factory with your children, you were pushed further into the home. The women's sphere became the home. Women went outside of the home less often for activities and social groups. Men became really the sole bread. This is when you get like even into like the 1950s housewife, that idea that women were really of the home. And also women in child labor were women and children were working in factories. There was a lot of child labor, and this will be addressed with laws, but it's not really gotten rid of. You can see that the first workers, especially in textile factories, were women, but their managers were men. Here are little kids doffing bobbins or taking off the bobbins once they've been full. They need to be doffed. Little kids became miners because they were small. They could fit into small places more easily than adults. Little kids were working long, long, long shifts. There was not public education for them. And little kids, like I said, they could be used to push and pull coal through these smaller mine shafts. The big idea here is that the influence of the Industrial Revolution spreads far beyond the economic world. And in fact, it can be argued that of all the revolutions in human history, the Industrial Revolution might be almost as important as the Agricultural Revolution because it influences almost every aspect of human life. In terms of long-term industrialization, it increased the material standards of the world, but the cost was incredible. With this huge amount of people moving to the cities, especially eventually male workers, there were increasingly horrible conditions, as well as the population explosion. The world population exploded. For example, the European population rose from 105 to 390 million, and the populations of North and South America rose from 13 to 145 million. So you can see how many migrants were moving there. This is partially because of a dramatic decrease in death rates. People were having less kids, but they were living longer, and that's because of medical advances. Since the scientific revolution happened, there were a whole host of medical advances, including vaccines. There was vaccines created against smallpox, cholera, rabies, tetanus, diphtheria, typhoid fever, and the plague. A man named Lister, which makes me think of Listerine, figured out that maybe you shouldn't be doing surgery with incredibly dirty equipment with other people's body parts / blood on them. This might help you reduce infection. And so he started putting those practices into place, and voila, less people died. Also, there were innovations in germ theory. For example, people started to figure out that bad water, or water that was mixed with things like feces, was not exactly good to drink. So we today have very good water, and it starts in the Industrial Revolution. Just to give you an idea of how horrific these conditions are, so here's a couple of pictures. You can see they're all very dark, full of smog and smoke, tight, cramped quarters, not exactly positive places. In the last part of this PowerPoint, we're going to be getting into reactions to industrialization.